We put a lot of trust in official records. We expect the systems that are built to remember things, to keep a permanent account of what happened, to actually work. But what happens when they don't? What happens when they forget? Or even scarier, what if they choose to forget?
Right, let's really get into that because today we're looking at that exact question. We're going to dive into two incredibly strange and honestly pretty unsettling cases. In one, the truth just kind of got lost in the shuffle of incompetence. In the other, it was deliberately, methodically destroyed. So, meet our two central figures. On one side, you've got Alberto Daniel Hill, an ethical hacker down in Uruguay. His case files, they basically just dissolved into this digital black hole. And on the other side, we have Beak, a police officer in California whose disciplinary records were intentionally torched to avoid public scrutiny. Two very different men on two different continents, but they share this one unbelievable reality. Their official history was wiped clean.
All right, so let's rewind and start at the beginning. We need to look at the official stories, the narratives that the authorities put out there that kicked this all off.
The initial stories seemed pretty simple, right? And very damning. For Alberto Hill, back in 2017, the narrative was that he was this slick cybercriminal. He supposedly hacked a medical provider, stole their records, and then demanded a big Bitcoin ransom. A modern-day digital villain. Then, a decade earlier, you have Beak. The story was that he was a classic corrupt cop, fired for sexual misconduct, covering up for his buddies, with really serious allegations like pimping tied to his name. In both cases, the authorities handed the public a neat, tidy story. But then, the stories themselves, the official records, started to vanish. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the way they disappeared couldn't be more different. This is the heart of it: neglect versus intent. Let's start with Alberto Hill. The official case against him, which was called Operation Bitcoins, didn't just get archived or misfiled. It fell into what you can only describe as a digital black hole. This wasn't some shadowy conspiracy, it was a system just completely failing. And I mean, when I say failing, it's almost comical how badly it failed. Try to find any public record of Operation Bitcoins. It's not there. The whole press release archive is just broken. If you search for September 2017, the month of his arrest, the website starts spitting out results from the future, like from the year 2025. Another try for that same month brings up a news story about Hurricane Maria. So the record isn't being hidden, it's just lost in this bizarre sea of digital chaos. Okay. Now, let's flip that coin. Beak's records didn't just get lost. Oh no, they were deliberately erased. This was a calculated, strategic move by his own department. And the timeline here just lays it all out, plain as day. A brand new law was coming that would make police misconduct records public. So, what happens? Just a few weeks before that law goes into effect, the Inglewood Police Department has a bonfire. They destroy hundreds of files, including exactly the kind of records that would have detailed Beak's case. See, this wasn't neglect. This was a preemptive strike against accountability. So you see, these vanishing files, they're not isolated incidents. They're actually symptoms of much deeper problems within these institutions. One was a system in crisis because of technological incompetence. The other, a system in crisis because of deep-rooted corruption. To really wrap your head around the level of corruption at Beak's department, you have to look at the patterns. Between 2003 and 2008, a staggering 5 out of the 11 people shot and killed by Inglewood PD officers were unarmed. Let that sink in. This wasn't just a few bad apples. This was a full-blown crisis, so bad that it actually triggered a federal investigation. And yeah, that investigation, it confirmed everybody's worst fears. The Department of Justice came in and found systemic deficiencies. Things like super vague use of force policies and massive conflicts of interest. It was basically the perfect breeding ground for misconduct to thrive, and for the records of that misconduct to be seen as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Meanwhile, in Alberta Hill's world, the crisis was one of basic competence. The so-called evidence against him was a joke. The firewall logs they said proved he hacked in, they actually showed all his connections were dropped. He never even got past the front door. And the ransom email, it was a printout, not a digital file. And you can't make this up, it didn't even have a Bitcoin address to send the ransom to. The entire case was built on a complete and total misunderstanding of how any of this technology works. So what do? The official records about you are either gone or just plain wrong. Both of these men were left with this permanent stain on their reputation, and they had to fight back in completely different ways.
For Brandon Beak, even with the files destroyed, one thing stuck. He landed on something called the Brady List. Now, this is a big deal. It's an official list that basically tells every prosecutor out there that this officer's history of dishonesty makes him an unreliable witness in court. It's a permanent black mark. Alberto Hill had to build his own record from scratch. He lived by this idea: don't trust words, doubt actions, but always look at the patterns. He pointed to his long career as an ethical hacker, someone who always reported security flaws, not exploited them. And since the official channels in Uruguay were a dead end, he went global, telling his story on podcasts and at conferences, essentially building a new public record online, completely on his own terms. But let's be real, a fight like that leaves scars. Winning doesn't erase the damage. In both of these cases, the failures of these institutions had a devastating real-world cost for real people. For Alberto Hill, the cost of all that incompetence was absolutely catastrophic financially. The authorities seized all his gear, but because they had no idea what they were looking at, he lost access to all his crypto assets. He claims his losses were over $500,000 gone. Not because of a bad investment, but because the system that was supposed to handle his case was just completely out of its depth. And the price tag for the corruption at Brandon Beak's department, well, that number is even more mind-blowing. We're talking $25 million. That's the settlement paid to a man named Maurice Hastings. He spent 38 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, based on fabricated evidence from the Inglewood PD. It's the ultimate proof that the same toxic culture that produced Brandon Beak had horrifying consequences for so many others. And that just leaves us here with this one final, really chilling question. We've seen how official history can just disappear, either sucked into a black hole of incompetence or thrown onto a bonfire of corruption. So if the truth can be lost that easily or that deliberately, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories are out there? How many other wrongful convictions are just sitting there, waiting for someone to find them?